and welcome to the Freedom Podcast. And this is a really special episode because actually we get to do it in person
Look,
together.
you're a real person.
You are.
Josh.
You're
I'm
real.
here.
You're not virtual
I'm
reality.
actually here in Raleigh in our building, in our venue here. Absolutely amazing. Just sitting here in the cafe. And yesterday I was here for Sunday. Both events we had your highest numbers since the launch.
Yeah, it was amazing.
It was amazing Sunday.
Yeah, it really was. And so great to have you guys here since we launched, because when we came up with this whole thing, and obviously we've taken everybody on the journey with some of the changes and some of the strategy that we've been applying, some of the journey that we've been on over this last 6 months. It's quite incredible to see what God's done and then actually see it come to life and be here.
Yeah.
So it's to have you guys here has been so special.
Yeah, it was extra special because when we came, we were here first when you got the keys, and it was a nightclub, so you had the big clown painted on the wall.
Yeah.
And then to see the transformation, and I just love this, the way that our church grabs hold of something, turns it into an excellent space. And being here and meeting the people yesterday, Josh, it blew us away. People, so many people we've never met, but they're serving. They're welcoming us. They're serving different areas. And to see the incredible growth, that you're experiencing right now, something like this church has grown 3 times since we were here last, 3 times the amount of people are here. And every week people coming in. We had people, was it 4 salvations yesterday? But absolutely thrilled to be here with Josh and the family, because we get time with our grandkids, seeing Rose. It's been a real special few days.
It's been great.
Now we get a chance to do a podcast together.
Come on, that's it.
Hey?
And we're going to get to review a few things. I know, I thought
it's like
we make the most of it. And it's really cool to actually get, and just do it in this way, because when we started these podcasts, one of the reasons that I wanted to start recording and capturing these conversations is because this environment and us talking about things has been, the whole, my kind of adult life, really, growing up, learning from you, asking questions, getting to talk things through, thrash things through. And so this is the most natural, because this is what it's always been like. So
often there's some sofas here, and obviously the amount of times that we spent, even as teenagers, you and Rose, just sitting around, I think just talking about kingdom, talking about leadership and all those things, just in a very natural way of just learning as we journeyed together. And we're still doing that now.
Yeah, we are.
Last night, sitting around, talking, just amazed at what God is doing. And to see the fruit of what you have built, and the guys here in Raleigh. We are always so proud of you guys. Incredible to be here. We love it.
And I think one of the things that was so great to see over this weekend was around how we obviously have not been showing the video messages. And I think there's some questions like, people are going to be like, hey, who are these guys? And is there going to be that connection? And actually, for all the times that you visited us in the States, it felt like there was more connection, more culture than ever, really, through that relationship, rather than it feeling like there was a lack. Actually, there was still that heart connection that was there.
Yeah.
It's a spirit thing, not just a, it's not just in a way that is just something, it's transactional. Oh, I see you, so I know you. It was something more about the heart, wasn't it?
Yeah, that really did impact me, because I prepared myself, and I thought maybe, these people, they've never seen me, heard me. Obviously, I'll preach yesterday at church and meet people, but there was this connection, a connection of almost like, hey, feel like, we know you already. And I guess that's the heart of the church, as you said, the spirit that we have within Freedom. And it was so encouraging, because even within worship, great sort of, responsiveness, you just see the culture. Because when you suddenly grow so much as a church, and you have all these new people come in, and you've got a matter of months to sort of see some of that culture of who we are built in, that's what we could see. It's working. And I think that was a real test yesterday of just seeing how this culture transfers. Okay, might not be watching on video every week and connected that way, but the connection is through you and Rose, through our guys here that carry the culture. It's working. and it's being transferred, and people are turning up here saying, "Hey, this is fresh and never seen anything like this." So I'm excited for the future, really, because it just feels like the engines are firing, and the potential here it's amazing.
Come on. And we had I think it's amazing the growth we're seeing. We had more people coming in last night doing Growth Track and signing up to be involved in the church and take that next step of ownership. But it's about those individuals. And there was someone who messaged in last night to say they wrote this on their Google reviews. Church, if you get a chance, go on your Google reviews and just go and support your local church doing that, because it does help people. It
does make a difference. Yeah.
People now, almost nobody comes through the doors without saying, I've already watched your messages. I've already been through your whole website. I've looked at your beliefs. I went through your social media, because that's how we as people are consumers, and they actually apply that same thing to the church. So they go through and they want to know what's it like to be there? Who are the people that attend there? What do they look like, etc. So just take a couple of minutes and go and write a Google review for your local church, because it actually helps other people feel a confidence to come through the doors.
Yeah, and your comments, just making a review, even if you've been in our church for some time, someone could read that and it could be the very thing that makes them decide, I'm going to give it a go. And you never know what could open up around that. So, if you grab time to do that, we'd love it.
Yeah, just Google search your church that you tend to, your Freedom Church, and you could then just say write a review when it comes up on Google, and that helps other people. So this guy who attended yesterday, he was someone who made a decision yesterday. He said the salvation prayer.
Fantastic.
He then came to our Growth Track in the evening, but he wrote this last night after coming to Growth Track. He said, "Wow, today was my first day at this church, and I finally found a home. This is an amazing place. The whole church is loving, caring, and supportive. As soon as I arrived, I was greeted and also prayed for, which I loved. If you're seeking a good church, this is the place. The leaders there are knowledgeable, and I love this church so much." And this is this guy's first day, making a decision, making a commitment. And that's what he wrote. And I just want to share that story because, again, we can always share, things are growing. This is the difference it's making. Yeah. Someone's finding home. And someone's finding their place.
Comes in first time, impacted, gives his life to Jesus, and then comes back at, was it 5 o'clock for your Growth Track last night?
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. Yeah. That someone who you didn't even know suddenly is stepping in to saying, I feel that this is home.
We had a number of guys there yesterday, actually, who had come first time in the morning, and they were there with us then that evening saying, I want to know more about this church because I've been so impacted today.
I love it.
So, last time we talked about being a dreamer. So a few weeks ago, we had this whole conversation around Joseph. We talked about this idea of being a dreamer, and that's something obviously we so relate to, isn't it, as Freedomites, because that's something in our nature. It's our DNA. We're punching above our weight. We love to live full, die empty. This is we really resonate with that, don't we?
Yep.
But there's something then that happens to Joseph after that, which I wanted us to talk about today, because he ends up going to prison and spending all these years in prison.
Yeah, it's about 13 years.
Waiting for this time to pass. And I was thinking about how we as followers of Jesus, we as Christians, we have these moments, we have these times where we are thinking, I'm going to see these dreams come to pass. Like Joseph, he's got this young guy, I've got this dream, I'm going to obviously have this authority, or I'm going to have this thing that plays out. But you don't always think about the journey that you're going to have to get there. And I was thinking about people listening to this today and thinking about how sometimes we're in that prison, that dark place, that place we weren't expecting. And we feel like, no, I'm the favored person of God. I walk with God's blessing. And you think about how Joseph was set apart, and all of a sudden he's in this prison. And it's not just like he's doing a little bit of time for a few weeks or a few months. It goes on years and years. And I was relating that and thinking about some of the things that, we've been through, and around how sometimes it feels like you're in a prison season of life. You might be in a literal prison, but there's something about this feels dark. This feels, discouraging. This feels frustrating. It doesn't line up with what God promised. And I just wondered if you maybe had some thoughts around what do we do to get through something like that, and what does that almost speak of to you?
I think it's a very real fact. I'm glad we're talking about this, because often within that story, you talk about the dreamer. Yeah, he gets thrown in prison, then he comes out. And
Yeah.
but it is what you're saying is, hey, there were 13 years of being captive,
Right.
being in prison, and it was a very real thing. And I'm sure there are people listening who can identify with maybe a season in your life, maybe you're in that season now, where it wasn't over quickly. It feels like, is there going to come an end to this? And I think for us talking about that that's the reality, but there's something purposeful within it. So when I think about the prison, Joseph, 13 years, he's in this, he's being kept in a prison where he could have easily thought, this is, I don't know, I can't do anything. I'm disempowered. And yet when you look at Joseph, what I love about him, he doesn't just like spend his time doing nothing. He almost realizes that although I'm here and it doesn't look like I can do much.
It's really good.
God's got something for me here. And whatever situation you're in, you got to realize that God can still use the prison. There's purpose in the prison.
Yeah.
There's purpose in the prison. You don't, God doesn't say, hey,
right.
now you're in the prison, there's no purpose. There is, I think this is what can give you a confidence and almost a reason to get up every day, even in the situation, to think, do you know what, there's purpose in the prison. And if you can, if you're in that, you almost need to write it down somewhere or just have it printed. So it's like, there's purpose in the prison. It's fine to be in the prison. And this isn't about, you never see Joseph really there feeling sorry for himself, because once we start to have self-pity, we lose sight of the purpose. But when we know there's purpose, what it does is it creates an intentionality about,
Right.
I'm going to use this day. I might not be able to control the outcome. And, I've been in a situation in the past where it felt like a prison, and it was for several years in a very difficult area. And things got worse before they get better.
Yeah.
You're going to really need to keep hold of your dream. And you're going to need to realize that even when things look like they're not going to immediately get better, as in, I got to walk through this valley, and this is the key: you walk through the valley of darkness. You don't camp. And for many people, they camp and settle because they feel sorry for themselves. And that's where you got to shake yourself off and say, come on, I might be in a season of the prison, but God has purpose in the prison. So every day I've got to approach it as, God, will you do something in me? And he will. There is something is happening when it feels like nothing is happening. And I can guarantee you
right.
that, all the time. I think the enemy or your mind might be saying, do you know what? Nothing's happening with you right now. Your life's on hold. You're in this season that is looks like a prison. That's actually untrue, because God has this incredible way of working something in you when it looks like nothing's happening. And that's what I've witnessed.
One of the things that comes to mind for me, G, is that when we were on our way to the States, so we've got this big dream, right? We're going to go make a difference.
Yeah.
We're going to go bring our academy teaching. We're going to raise up missionaries here in the US. And we end up going and selling all of our possessions, selling our house, selling our car, getting ready to move. And then everything fell through, and we couldn't get a visa. We got rejected once, twice, 3 times. And it was like we were barred, and we felt like we were imprisoned. It's like we couldn't move forward.
Yeah.
But God had given us the dream. He said, right, this is what I've got for you. I'm not asking for this dream. It comes into my life, but the pathway to it is so different than my expectation. And I think sometimes when we have an expectation, so for example, you think of Joseph, and he is, right, I'm going to be in a place of influence and power. You don't think that you're going to go downwards to get to that place. And I know for us, and it's like, right, we're going to go and plant something life-giving, something changing, something that raises people up and makes a difference in this world. But in fact, we come up against resistance and the door closes. And I know for me and Rose, that was a really difficult time because it felt like the bars were around us. And it's like, oh, we can't move forward. We can't go back to what we were doing before. We can't move forward. We're actually, it feels like we're locked into a situation and it's different to our expectation. I remember that really shook me personally because I was like, God, this doesn't line up with what I thought or expected. This dream that you gave us, this is not the pathway. But one of the things that strikes me about the story of Joseph is that because he's in the prison, he is then able to be with the cupbearer who then has the dream that he interprets.
Got it, Josh.
Then leads, it's the pathway to the palace.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's not the pathway that you imagine. And because we got rebuffed for our visa and the door closed, we stopped the direction that we were going, which we were going to end up in a different location in America.
Yep.
And we ended up doing something different because we were barred, because the walls closed in, because we had we had the prison time, and it actually created a new pathway for us.
Yeah.
And I think that we're almost, I know that I struggled in the moment to see the greater purpose that was within that prison time, within the bars.
Yeah. I mean, it's brilliant point to pick up. So we've got, there is purpose in the prison, but there's a pathway in the prison.
Yeah.
And the pathway isn't always what we expect.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. That's what you're talking about. And what God will even do is he will cause either rejection, which is what happened to Joseph from his brothers, but also from, Potiphar's wife. I mean, he's got rejection from, he was like a man of favor. Next minute he's thrown in prison. So there's rejection that throws him not upwards, but downwards. He's like, suddenly, it's not like I'm walking in the fulfillment of what God has said. No, he goes downwards into the prison, but it's the pathway. And God's pathway is often opposite of what we think. Sometimes what he'll do is he'll take us down before he can take us up. Because when we're in the prison, that's where the real work takes place. And I know, just observing, the way you and Rose had to, you made the sacrifices, you set yourself up. It's like, we're ready. And then it's like, you're on hold. And what God was doing in you as a couple at that point, and the heartache, the challenge, the faith, it was building resilience in you that you'd never had before.
Yeah.
And it was building faith in you.
It did. It was transformative.
It was. And it is tough. I'm sure some people are going to be thinking, oh, yeah, well, it's easy to say that, or it's tough. But God, if you allow him, he will keep trusting him, because he will build a resilience in you. Whatever you need, this is the preparation and the pathway where you're going, is God will allow that time. If you approach it correctly, he will allow that time to prepare you so that the approach you take, if you take a good approach, you'll arrive at the destination he has planned. And that's what was happening with Joseph. I was thinking about Nelson Mandela, who I think 1964, he was put in prison for over 40 years. And then when he was released, he ends up becoming president for 4 years. So he has 40 odd years of imprisonment.
Wow.
And then 4 years he steps in to, changing South Africa, and this like purpose on his life. What can you imagine him? It was like a hard labor camp.
Yeah.
And I've seen the island where he was placed for 40 odd years to break him.
Right.
But it didn't break him. It prepared him. And that in itself became a pathway to what he was going to do in his country. And it's so fascinating how if we give up hope, Joseph could have easily thought, well, I'm in this prison, God's abandoned me, he's forgotten, things haven't worked out. No, he's that God's still with me. And then what he does, and this is another thing when you're in the prison, he doesn't stop serving.
Right.
It says
That's
that
really
Joseph, he, even with what he has, is like, I'm going to steward what I have in my hands. Well, you haven't got anything, you're in prison. He was doing something, because it says that he was so good at managing the prison, even the guard that was over him didn't really bother much, because Joseph he basically
running the place.
He ran the place. So he was thinking, I'm going to steward this, and I'm just going to do with what God's put in my hands. And that's what he does. And then through it, he becomes influential. So he interprets the dreams, doesn't he, of the cupbearer and the baker. And so he's saying, I'm going to do something. And this is another area, is also create momentum in the prison. If you're in the prison, I've seen some people switch off and just almost think, well, when God's ready, he'll get me out. No, he's a steward in the prison.
It's really good.
Steward what's in your hands, and he sows seeds. He's sowing seeds to these two men that are influential. They have an influence with Pharaoh.
The baker and the cupbearer.
Yeah, so he's sowing the seeds. And even when it comes true, and he says, hey, remember me. When you get before the king, remember me. He forgets him. But he sowed the seed. And then sometime later, when the time is right and God's timing is right, suddenly it's like, there was this man in prison. So he sowed the seed and the seed was there. Guys, some of you have sown a seed and you're thinking, is it ever going to come to fruition? But trust God. He is he's at work. When you think nothing's happening, something's happening. And this is what was happening with Joseph. But he sowed what he had. He kept faith that God was in it. And he was faithful in that. There was purpose. There was a pathway. He created momentum.
I think that one of the things that God uses prison time for is to redirect us. I think sometimes we think, right, I know where I'm going. And that's what happened with us, is that we felt we were barred and God redirected us. And that story I read out earlier, we don't get to be that guy's, wow, this church family, what have I found today? We don't get that story if I'm not redirected back in 2018. That then redirects us and shapes us to where we are today. Like, we wouldn't be sat here right now in this space.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many journeys and stories where it feels like a shipwreck. It feels like a prison. I think about Paul, and he's on his way on the ship, and it's like he's the anointed man of God. It's like he's the favoured one. He's a prisoner, and then he gets shipwrecked. They've been in a storm for weeks. Like, it doesn't sound like someone who's got favour or grace on them, but God redirects them through the shipwreck, through the prison time, if you like, to go to Crete, isn't it? And they end up then seeing a whole revival break out because of that redirection. And I think around how whatever people might be going through right now that feels like a prison, it feels dark, it's not what you envisioned, it feels frustrating. God might be using it to redirect you to something else. And just take some faith and courage that God's sovereign. He's got a plan for you, that he guides your steps, that he's never fails, he's not going to let you down. Because when you understand that truth, it doesn't matter if you're in the prison, because God is still going to be glorified and he will still lead you to where you need to be.
One of the words I was going to use next was about his sovereignty. And you went straight there, which is so important, because you've got to understand that. You've got to believe it. You've got to build your faith around that, is that he is over all. And this is what it will test. Because if you lose hope and faith and you're thinking, I've been in this prison situation for several years, and you lose hope, what you're doing is you're really doubting that he is sovereign. There's almost something like, has God forgotten me? Has somehow I've got lost somehow in this back corner and no one sees me here? No, God is sovereign. And I think this is where you take confidence. It's like, God, I trust you in your timing. And in the meantime, prepare me. In the meantime, I believe there's purpose. In the meantime, I'm going to do some things that create momentum, because God's always attracted momentum.
It's really good.
So it's like, but you've got to have this. It's overshadowed completely by understanding more and more what the sovereignty of God looks like. That no matter what the situation is, he is like he is like all powerful, he is all knowing, and within it, he is like moving and shifting and preparing you. So for you, Josh, how he redirected you and Rose in your life, it was like, because that's the sovereignty of God. It's like you created movement, you responded to the call, and he says no. And people yesterday came to know Jesus in this very building I'm in, because you decided to keep like the faith and trust in God's sovereignty through the prison time in your life. And even when certain doors became closed, he's opening another
Right.
door. And that's the crux. When we give up that hope and that faith and we feel hurt towards God, that's when things go wrong. But Joseph kept a good heart.
Yeah.
And I think one of the other things I wanted to add into this is something that the Holy Spirit gives you, but you're going to need joy in the prison. You need to find joy.
It's really
Joy
good.
comes from thanksgiving. Joy comes from gratitude. And often we struggle in the prison because of areas of entitlement. We think, well, I responded and God has let me down, and what you do is when we deal with entitlement and say, actually, God can use me in this situation. If you come with like gratitude, you're going to need gratitude as a gift to see your way through. And I'm sure you guys experienced that. It's like you got to work on gratitude because you're not feeling that when you're stuck. You can easily complain, and we know in Scripture that so often God's people, they slipped into complaining through entitlement, in a difficult situation, rather than thinking we're going to choose gratitude. And what does gratitude produce? Joy, because it's about the
It's really
purpose
good.
that's laid up before you. So it's like, okay, it's about what we know is to come. So it's all about what we know is to come, not about exactly where we are.
It's really good. And I remember you preaching this before, G, is that actually in those prison times, we can actually become bitter or we can become better.
Yes, Josh, yeah.
And it's like, are we going to dwell on self-pity
Yep.
about how things have not panned out in the way that we'd imagined? We become discouraged, we become frustrated, and we allow then bitterness to be harbored in our hearts, or do we become better? And we actually grow in character. We grow closer to God. We call out to him more because we need him more. And we grow in our faith, or we choose to become bitter because we are frustrated and angry at God for allowing us to end up in a prison cell. And it's like, actually, this is the exact place you needed to be. But you've got to trust me in this. And I think that that's so true for so many of us. Each one of us, I think we all go through prison seasons in our life. But it's like, how do we handle it? Are we going to become embittered by the disappointment? Because we've both experienced things like that, haven't we? Where it's like you go through it and it's like, this is not what I thought. God, you said this, and this doesn't look anything like it. And how we handle that really does define so much of our walk, doesn't it? It's like we've got to choose in those moments, I'm going to be better. I'm going to choose to handle this in the way that God wants me to, not just become embittered.
And this is where the power of the dream. So Joseph, I think what sustained him in the prison for 13 years, I think it was because of the power of the dream that was given to him. Whether he'd written it down on the wall of his prison cell, I don't know, but there was something about, no, that's the dream. I might be here, but that's the dream. That's where I'm going. That's the plan. I'm going there.
Right.
God's gonna like use me. There's purpose, and I'm going to see it fulfilled. And so I think the power of the dream sees you through. It's like really important to almost fix on that. So even if I'm here, no, this is what God has said. So you can either choose to lose heart or you choose to take hold of the dream, and that gives you staying power when you're in the prison.
Brilliant. Well, there's so much there, G, for us to think about and reflect on today. And I think there's, for so many people going through something like this, I just think, if you feel right now that you are in that season of darkness or like I said, frustration, discouragement, just try and trust that God's going to use it. Trust his sovereignty, trust his power. His hand is over all things, and that actually he's going to do something in you. Because I 100% believe that Joseph was a better man, a better steward, a better servant off the back of that time than he was before he went in. And so when he then goes to the palace and he becomes a ruler, he becomes the second to Pharaoh in the whole nation. He's this great authority. He has grown through stewarding all these small things, but that was in the prison time.
And I don't think Joseph was one day longer in the prison than he needed to be.
That is good.
It's like that's what God was doing in him. There was a work being done in him. Why? Why was he in prison for 13 years? Why did he experience all of this? because of the great call on his life to basically save millions of people. He was being chosen to save millions of people. Well, he was only a teenager. So what God was doing, even within the prison, was building character, trust between him and his Father God, and all these other areas of character. It was being built into him in such a profound way. In the darkness, there was something being built within his heart. And you see, when we have calling on our life, and I think often the prison actually speaks of the purpose that's coming. So it's like, if you're going through some things, know that God has purpose for you, because I always know when you're like passing through. Think about what you guys have been seeing lately. Over 80 salvations in the last few months. Lives changed. Wow, there was calling. So what God was doing was preparing you, because some of us want to jump straight into the fulfillment of the dream, but we wouldn't be able to handle it when it comes. Joseph couldn't have carried the weight of governing Egypt. It would have crushed him. And it's almost like the weight of the call would be too heavy because we're not ready to carry it. So he takes us on the journey of preparation. So when we get there, we don't sink within it, but we walk within it. And I just got this last, one verse that I want to just perhaps, finish up with. Hebrews 6, verse 12. It says, we don't want you to become lazy, but to imitate those who through faith and patience inherit what has been promised. We talk about inheriting the promise. Joshua, he was ready to go into the promised land, but because other people around him were negative, entitled, and complained, it says that they brought a bad report back, the spies. So it meant that Joshua, for 40 years, had to wait. That was his prison. 40 years in the wilderness, but he was ready to go. But in 40 years, God prepared him. And this is what it's referring to. The promise that we need to inherit comes through faith and patience. And what this means is, you might think being in the prison is just being patient. It's not. Being patient actually can just be, well, I'm waiting, I'm not doing anything. The faith part of this, faith and patience, means you've got an expectation. That's the dream. The expectation of faith. Faith and patience partner together. And I think one of the worst things you can do is be in the prison and almost switch off and just think,
right,
I'm just going to wait till God changes something. No, faith activates. Faith says, I've got something in my hands. I'm going to use this gift I have to interpret dreams. That's the faith part of Joseph. He wasn't just patient.
Yeah.
Some people get mixed up. I just need to be more patient. No, maybe you need to activate faith in the prison.
Come on.
Activate what's in your hands in the prison. Faith and patience is what calls you to grab hold of the promise.
Right.
That's what Joseph had.
Amen. So good. Thank you, G, for that. Such a great episode. So much good stuff in there to dwell on, think on, pray into. We'll be back next week with another episode. I'm going to be doing an interview, another Freedom People episode. Had a great time with Paul Andrews last week.
Love Paul.
So we're going to be doing another episode of that next week. So look forward to that in your feeds. All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. See you soon.